Welcome to the 1,000 Nights and 1 Night. Now, when it was the 72nd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Nuzhat al-Zaman heard her brother reciting, she called the chief eunuch and said to him, Go fetch me the man who is repeating this poetry. Replied he, Of a truth I heard him not, and I wot not that folks are all sleeping. But she said, Whomsoever thou seest awake is the reciter. So he went yet, and found none on wake except the stoker. For Zau al-Makan was still insensible, and when his companion saw the eunuch standing by his head, he was afraid of him. Then said the eunuch, Art thou who repeated poetry, but now and my lady heard him? The stoker fancied that the dame was wroth with the reciter, and being afraid, he replied, By Allah, 'twas not I. Rejoined the eunuch, Who then was the reciter? Point him out to me. Thou must know who it is, seeing that thou art awake. The fireman feared for Zau al-Makan, and said to himself, Haply the eunuch will do him some hurt. So he answered, By Allah, I none know who it was. Said the eunuch, By Allah, thou liest, for there is none on awake here but thou. So needs must thou know him. By Allah, but thou, so needs thou must know him. The fireman replied, I tell thee the truth. Some passer-by, some wayfarer must have recited the verse and disturbed me and kept me awake. Allah requite him. Quoth the eunuch, If thou happen upon him, point him out to me, and I will lay hands on him and bring him to the door of Our Lady's litter, or do thou take him with thine own hand. So the eunuch left him and went his way, and going on to his mistress, told her all this, and said to her, None knoweth who it is. It must have mean some passer-by, some wayfarer. And she was silent. Meanwhile, Zau al-Makan came to himself and saw that the moon had reached the middle heavens. The breath of the dawn breeze breathed upon him, and his heart was moved to longing and sadness. So he cleared his throat and was about to recite verses when the fireman asked him, What wilt thou do? Answered Zau al-Makan, I have a mind to repeat somewhat of poetry, that I may quench therein the fire in my heart. Quoth the other, Thou knowest not what befell me whilst thou wast of fate, and how I escaped death only by beguiling the eunuch. Tell me what happened, quoth Zau al-Makan. Replied the stoker, Whilst thou wast aswoon, there came up to me but now a eunuch with a long staff of almond tree wood in his hand, who took to looking in all the people's faces as they lay asleep, and asked me who it was recited the verses, finding none awake but myself. I told him in reply it was some passer-by, some wayfarer, so he went away, and Allah delivered me from him, else had he killed me. But first he said to me, If thou hear him, bring him to us. When Zau al-Makan heard this, he wept and said, Who is it would forbid me to recite? I will surely recite, befall me what may, for I am near mine own land and care for none. Rejoined the fireman, Thy design is not, save to lose thy life. And Zau al-Makan retorted, Needs must I recite verses. Verily, said the stoker, needs must there be a parting between us and thee in this place, albeit I had not intended to leave thee till I brought thee to thy native city and reunited thee with thy father and thy mother. Thou hast now tarried with me a year and a half, and I have never harmed thee in aught. What ails thee, then, that thou must needs recite verses, seeing that we are tired out with walking and watching, and all the folk are asleep, for they require sleep to rest them of their fatigue? But when Zau al-Makan answered, I will not be turned away from my purpose, then grief moved him, and he threw off concealment and began repeating these couplets. Stand thou by the homes and hail the lords of the ruined stead. Cry thou, for an answer, belike reply to thee shall be sped. If the night and answers irk thy spirit, kindle a torch, will repine and illuminate the gloom with a gleaming gleed. If the snake of the sand dunes hiss, I shall marvel not at all. Let him bite, so I bite these beauteous lips of the luscious red. O Eden, My soul hath fled in despite of the maid I love. Had I lost hope of heaven, my heart in despair were dead. We were, and were the days enthralled to all our wells, dwelling in union sweet and homed in fair sight. Who shall restore the home of the beloved, where showed light of the place for I conjoined with time's delight? And as he ceased his verses, he shrieked 3 shrieks and fell senseless to the ground. And the firemen rose and covered him. Now when Nuzhat al-Zaman heard the first improvisation, she called to mind her father and her mother and her brother and their home, and then she wept, and she cried at the eunuch and said to him, Woe to thee! He who recited the first time hath recited a second time, and I heard him. By Allah, and thou fetch him not to me, I will assuredly arouse the chamberlain on thee, and he shall beat thee and cast thee out. But take these 100 dinars, and give them to the singer, and bring him to me gently, and do him no harm. If he refuse, hand to him this purse of 1,000 dinars. Then leave him and return to me, and tell me after thou hast informed thyself of his place and his calling, and what countryman he is. Return quickly, and linger not. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. Now, when it was the 73rd night, she said, It hath reached me, O auspicious king, that Nuzhat al-Zaman sent the eunuch to make inquiries concerning the singer, and said, Beware how thou come back to me and report that I could not find him. So the eunuch went out, and he laid about the people and trod in their tents, but found none awake, all being asleep for weariness, till he came to the stoker and saw him sitting up and his head uncovered. So he drew near him, and seizing him by the hand, said to him, It was thou dost recite the verses. The fireman was afraid for his life and replied, No, by Allah, O chief of the people, it was not I. But the eunuch said, I will not leave thee until thou show me who recite the verses, for I dread returning to my lady without him. Now, when the fireman heard these words, he feared for Zau al-Makan, and wept with exceeding weeping, and said to the eunuch, By Allah, it was not I, and I know him not. I only heard some passer-by, some wayfarer, recite verses. So do not thou commit sin on me, for I am a stranger, and come from the holy city of Jerusalem, and Abraham, and the friend of Allah be with you all. Rise up and fare with me, rejoiced the eunuch, and tell my lady this with thine own mouth, for I have seen none other awake except thyself. Quoth the stoker, Hast thou not come and seen me sitting in the place where I am now, and dost thou not know my station? Thou wast none can stir from this place, except the watchman sees me. So go thou to thy station, and if thou again meet any one after this hour reciting aught of poetry, whether he be near or far, it will be I, or some one I know, and thou shalt not learn of him but by me. Then he kissed the eunuch's head, and spake him fair till he went away. But the castrato fetched around and returned secretly, came and stood behind the fireman, fearing to go back to his mistress without tidings. As soon as he was gone, the stoker arose and aroused Zau al-Makan, and said to him, Come, sit up, that I may tell thee what happened. So Zau al-Makan sat up, and his companion told him what had passed, and he answered, Let me alone. I will not heed of this, and I care for none, for I am near my own country. Quoth the stoker, Wilt thou not obey thy flesh and the devil? If thou fear no one, I fear for thee and for my life. So Allah upon thee, recite nothing more verses till thou come to thine own land. Indeed, I had not deemed thee so ill-conditioned. Dost thou not know that this lady is the wife of the chamberlain, and he is minded to chastise thee for disturbing her? Belike she is ill, or restless for fatigue of the journey, and the distance of the place from her home, and this is the second time she hath sent the eunuch to look for thee. However, Zau al-Makan paid no heed to the fireman's words, and cried out a third time, and began versifying with these couplets. I fly the carper's injury, whose carping sorely vexed me. He chides and taunts me, wanting not, he burns me, but more grievously. The blamer cries, he is consoled. I say, my own dear land to see. They ask, why be that land so dear? I say, it taught me in love to be. They asked, what raised its dignity? I say, what made my ignominy? Whate'er the bitter cup I drain, far be for me that land to flee. Nor will I bow to those who blame, and for such love would deal me shame. Hardly had he made an end of these verses, and come to a conclusion, when the eunuch, who had heard him from his hiding place at his head, came up to him, whereupon the fireman fled and stood afar off to see what passed between them. Then the eunuch said to Zau al-Makan, peace be with thee, O my lord, and the mercy of Allah and his blessings. Replied Zau al-Makan, and he said, O my lord, continued the eunuch, and Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. Now, when it was the 74th night, she said, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that the eunuch said to Zau al-Makan, O my lord, I have sought thee several times this night, for my mistress biddeth thee to seek her. Quoth Zau al-Makan, and who be this bitch that seeketh for me? I'll curse her, and curse her husband with her. And he began to revile the eunuch, who could not make him no answer, because his mistress had charged him to do Zau al-Makan no hurt, nor bring him save of his own special will, and if he would not accompany him, to give him the 1,000 dinars. So the castrato began to speak him fair, and said to him, O my lord, take this purse and go with me. We will do thee no unright, O my son, nor wrong thee in aught. But our subject is that thou bend our gracious steps with me to my mistress, to receive her answer, and to return in weal and safety, and thou shalt have a handsome present, as one who bringeth good news. When Zau al-Makan heard this, he arose and went with the eunuch, and walked among the sleeping folk, stepping over them, whilst the fireman followed after them from afar, and kept his eye upon him, and said to myself, alas, the pity of this youth! Tomorrow they will hang him. And he ceased not following them till he approached their station, without any observing them. Then he stood still, and he said, how base it will be of him if he say it was I who bade him recite the verses. This was the case of the stoker. But as regards what befell Zau al-Makan, he ceased not walking with the eunuch till he reached his station, and the castrato went in with Nuzhat al-Zaman, and said, O my lady, I have brought thee him whom thou soughtest, and he is a youth fair of face, and bearing the marks of wealth and gentle breeding. When she had heard this, her heart fluttered, and she cried, let him recite some verses, that I may hear him near hand, and ask him his name, and his condition, and his native land. Then the eunuch went out to Zau al-Makan, and he said, recite what verses thou knowest, for my lady is here hard by, listening to thee, and after I ask thee of thy name, and thy native country, and thy condition. Replied he, with love and gladness. But an thou ask my name, it is erased, and my trace is unplaced, and my body a waste. I have a story, the beginning of which is not known, nor can end of it be shown. And behold, I am even as who hath exceeding in wine drinking, and who hath not spared himself, one who was afflicted with distempers, and who wandered from this right-minded, being perplexed about his case, and drowned in a sea of thought. When Nuzhat al-Zaman heard this, she broke out into excessive weeping and sobbing, and said to the eunuch, ask him if he hath parted from one he loveth, even as his mother or father. The castrato asked as she bade him, and Zau al-Makan replied, yes, I have parted from every one I love, but the dearest of all was my sister, from whom fate hath separated me. When Nuzhat al-Zaman heard this, she exclaimed, Allah Almighty reunited him with what he loveth. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased saying her permitted say. And now, when it was the 75th night, she said, it hath reached me, O auspicious king, that when Nuzhat al-Zaman heard his words, she said, Allah reunite him with what he loveth. Then quoth she to the eunuch, tell him to let me hear somewhat anent his separation from his countrymen and his country. The eunuch did so, and Zau al-Makan sighed heavily, and began repeating these couplets. Is not her love a pledge by all mankind confessed? The house that hometh Hinda by be for ever blessed. Her love, all levels, man can reek of naught beside. Not of before or after can for man have zest. 'Tis through the veil is paved with musk and ambergris, that day when Hinda's footsteps on its face is pressed. Hail to the beauty of our camp, the pride of folk, the dearling who enslave our hearts by their behest. Allah on time's delight sent large dropped clouds that teem with genial rain, but bear no thunder in their breast. I vow to Allah, if at home I sight my sister Nuzhat al-Zamani height, I'll pass the days in joyance and delight, mid Bashminians, maidens soft and white. To sound of harps in various modes they smite, draining the bowl, while eyes rain lively light neath half-closed lids, a sipping lips red bright, by streaming bank flowing through my garden sight. Now, when he had finished his verse, Nuzhat al-Zaman lifted up a skirt of the litter curtain and looked at him. As soon as her eyes fell on his face, she knew him from certain, and cried out, "Oh, my brother! Oh, Zau al-Makan!" He also looked at her and knew her, and cried out, "Oh, my sister! Oh, Nuzhat al-Zaman!" Then they threw himself at each other, and they gathered each other to their bosom, and the twain fell down in fainting fit. When the eunuch saw this case, he wondered at them, and throwing over them somewhat to cover them, waited till they should recover. After a while they came to themselves, and Nuzhat al-Zaman rejoiced with exceeding joy. Oppression and depression left her, and gladness took the mastery of her, and she repeated these verses. Time sware my life should fate in woeful waste, forsworn art time, expedite thy sin in haste. Comes weal and comes a welcome friend to aid, to him it brings good news, rise, gird thy waist. I spurned old world tales of Eden bliss, till came I, Kasur, on those lips to taste. When Zau al-Makan heard this, he pressed his sister to his breast. Tears streamed from his eyes for excess of joy, and he repeated these couplets. Long I lamented that we fell apart, while tears repentant railed from these eyne, and swear, if time unite us twain once more, severance shall never sound from tongue of mine. Joy hath so overwhelmed me that excess of pleasure from mine eyes draws gout of brine. Tears, O mine eyes, have now become your wont. Ye weep for pleasure, and ye weep for pine. They sat a while at the litter door, till she said to him, Come with me into the litter, and tell me all that hath befallen thee, and I will tell thee what happened to me. So they entered, and Zau al-Makan said, Do thou begin thy tale. Accordingly, she told him all that had come to her since their separation at the Khan, and what had happened to her with the Badawai, how the merchant had bought her of him, and had taken her to her brother Sharrkan, and had sold her to him, how he had freed her at the time of buying, and how he had made a marriage contract with her, and had gone into her, and how the king and their sire had sent and asked for her from Sharrkan. Then quoth she, Praised be Allah who hath vouchsafed thee to me, and ordained that even as we left our father together, so together shall we return to him. And she added, Of a truth my brother Sharrkan gave me in marriage to this chamberlain, that he might carry me to my father. And this is what befell me from the first to the last. So, now tell me how hath fared with thee since I left thee. Thereupon he told her all that had happened to him from beginning to end, and how Allah vouchsafed had sent him to the firemen, and how he had journeyed with him, and spent his money on him, and had served him night and day. She praised the stoker for this, and Zau al-Makan added, Of a truth, O my sister, this fireman hath dealt with me in such benevolent wise as would not lover with lass nor sire with son, or that he fasted and gave me to eat, and he walked while he made me ride, and I owe my life to him, said she. Allah willing, we will requite him for all this according to our power. Then she called the eunuch, who came and kissed Zau al-Makan's hand, and she said, Take thy reward for glad tidings, O face of good omen. It was thy hand reunited me with my brother. So the purse I gave thee and all in it are thine. But now go to thy master, and bring him quickly to me. The castrato rejoiced, and going to the chamberlain, summoned him to his mistress. Accordingly, he came in to his wife, and found Zau al-Makan with her, asked who he was. She told him all that had befallen them both first and last, and added, Know, O chamberlain, that thou hast married no slave girl. Far from it. Thou hast taken to wife the daughter of King Omar bin al-Nu-uman, for I am Nuzhat al-Zaman, and this is my brother Zau al-Makan. When the chamberlain heard the story, he knew it to be sooth, and its manifest truth appeared to him, and he was certified that he was become King Omar bin al-Nu-uman's son-in-law. So he said to himself, 'Twill be my fate to be viceroy of some province. Then he went up to Zau al-Makan and gave him joy of his safety and reunion with his sister, and bade his servants forthwith make him ready a tent and one of the best of his own horses to ride. Thereupon said Nuzhat al-Zaman, We are now near our country, and I would be left alone with my brother, that we may enjoy each other's company and take our fill of it ere we reach Baghdad. For when we have been parted for such a long, long time. Be it as thou biddest, replied the chamberlain, and going forth from them, sent them wax candles and various kinds of sweetmeats, together with 3 suits of the costliest of Zau al-Makan. Then he returned to the litter and related the good he had done, and Nuzhat al-Zaman said to him, Bid the eunuch bring me the fireman, and give him a horse to ride, and ration him with a tray of food morning and evening, and let him not be forbidden to leave us. The chamberlain called the castrato, and charged him to do accordingly. So he replied, I hear and I obey. And he took his pages with him and went out in search of the stoker till he found him in the rear of the caravan, girthing his ass and preparing for flight. The tears were running down across his cheeks out of the fear for his life and grief for his separation from Zau al-Makan, and he was saying to himself, Indeed, I warned him for the love of Allah, but he would not listen to me. Oh, would I knew what has become of him. Ere he had done speaking, the eunuch was standing by his head, whilst the pages surrounded him. The fireman turned, and seeing the eunuch and the pages gathered around him, became yellow with fear. And Shahrazad perceived the dawn of the day, and ceased to say her permitted say. And so do I cease my reading for this day, until it be morrow.